columnist at The National. It's Shona Craven. Thank you
Morning,
very
guys.
much.
Thanks for being with us.
Very good morning. Shall we kick off with the front page of The Times then? On many of the front pages, Shona, it's that good news from the King.
Yes, so a lot of the papers are running with this video statement that the King has given, saying that his cancer treatment can be scaled back in the new year, and a lot of people have praised him for being very open about a very personal matter and using his experience to encourage other people to take up screening. Perhaps the most important part of the statement was that he said he'd learned something that troubles him deeply. At least 9 million people in the country are not up to date with the cancer screening available to him. That's at least 9 million opportunities for early diagnosis being missed. So he has been very open about his own cancer journey. We don't know what type of cancer it is, but we don't have the right to know that. But also, a virtue's been made of that because they feel that if other sufferers don't know the type of cancer, it means that his message is reaching other people in the same position, even if it's a different sort of cancer. So he's obviously using this to say the earlier we catch this, the better, and that the treatment might not be as gruelling, I suppose, if you catch it early and get the treatment. Obviously, the King's got access to the best treatment available, so we would probably expect things to be above average for him. But yeah, he's done that, and he's been praised for doing that, and the papers have really mostly run with that on their front pages.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually sort of land on that, but I suppose the ambiguity about what he has does allow him to say every type of cancer. It's not just prostate, it's not just bowel, whatever cancer you potentially have, just get it checked.
It is, but at the same time, I think it's just one of those things where, in particular, isn't it? It's that trope about men not going to the doctor often enough. Whereas, of course, men, of course, are slightly more prone to certain kinds of cancers, prostate cancer, obviously. And, we were joking earlier about the lack of my moustache. Anybody, might have seen me on the evening press preview with it. Of course, it's one of those things that we do talk about is that need. So it's a particularly good role that I think actually that he can inhabit, regardless of whether or not, in fact, he had got ill. You don't want to say that it sort of in some way contributes to that he did get ill at all, but it does it gives a role to the royal family. It's something that we very often do talk about, actually, what is the role of the royal family sort of going into the future, simply beyond the ceremonial role. Well, as something in terms of leading public health campaigns, especially when there is so much else to do with the health service in this country and the many troubles that it currently faces that we'll get on to in a second, I think it is something that's very positive that, at the very least, there can be this figure that everybody recognises, everybody knows. It just says, go and get checked, do the basics, and actually then you'll be looked after much better than if, obviously, you leave it to the last minute.
And the other point that we're all missing here is that we're talking about good news for once here on Sky News.
That's true. That's a good point. I hadn't even realised that. What a great way to start.
It's a nice way to start a Saturday. They call it the King Charles effect. I just wanted to double-check. I wasn't being real. I was checking the notes there. 51% increase in people going to contact their doctor, contact the NHS after he revealed his cancer diagnosis. So there was a huge bump.
That's crazy.
Right?
Like, why would you not put your own health first? Why would you need the King to prompt you? But good.
Yeah, as long as people are doing it right, it's great.
Message hits home, doesn't it?
It does.
Talking of the NHS, Benedict, front page of The Guardian, focusing on that resident doctors' strike.
Yes, and this is the Prime Minister, this is Keir Starmer intervening, as I think we all kind of expected would happen at some point, to do the very difficult dance that a Labour Prime Minister is going to have to do in this situation, which is to say, of course, I back the rights of workers to strike. Of course, especially seeing as, this is, a great part of the Labour tradition and what lots of our backbenchers have been very firm on. And, of course, in the build-up to him becoming Prime Minister, there was all the talk of doctor strikes with one eye on there becoming, a Labour government at some point. And now he's sat here going, as we always have, it seems these days, when we head up to the winter NHS crisis and the flu and everything that comes along, and resident doctors are picking the maximum moment of damage to say, look, we want change in pay, we want change in terms of whatever it may be. And he is doing what he has to do, which is say, look, as much as I respect your right to do this, which our entire movement has fought for, please don't do this, because it's going to be a disaster, and it's going to mean cancelled appointments, and it's going to mean an added backlog. And it must be said, it's one of the few things that Labour up until now has been able to point to as having a net positive effect since coming in. Waiting times are down. Not hugely, but they are down. But that was always with one eye on the, well, we all know things get more difficult in the wintertime, and that's when there's going to be the crunch. And that was the case before we had, you know, the sort of the uptick in COVID and flu and everything else. It's going to be very tricky because obviously it doesn't look as though, as much as the government was sort of talking very positively a couple of days ago about the possibility of averting a strike, this is not the sort of intervention I think that a Prime Minister would make if actually they did feel confident about that.
And on that sort of fight with the unions, I mean, before they came to office, Wes Streeting was quite sort of forceful about there needs to be change with GPs and with doctors. This is now the second, I think, intervention by the Prime Minister. The first time it was written on op-ed, but Wes Streeting was talking about it last week as well. I wonder if they've decided that they want to pick a fight with the BMA, of all the unions, that this is one, you know, that are well-paid doctors. They realise, when I was speaking to the Minister yesterday, she talked about everyone within the health service who's pulling. We really value that, you know, sort of singling out this one group that they're willing to take on.
Well, you know, one thing, maybe this seems trivial, but one thing I find interesting, and I hadn't realised we'd rebranded junior doctors as resident doctors, which I think is such a long overdue thing, because this notion that they're junior when actually they've done a huge amount of training, you know, they're earning salaries that they deserve because of all the work and training that they've put in already. So I don't think it's something that Labour want to be doing. I don't think it's a battle that they want to start fighting, but they've obviously looking at the graphs, looking at, you know, the situation, and they are very worried. But it's interesting, the Eye today is talking about urgent NHS drive to give children the flu vaccine before Christmas.
Yeah.
And the focus now is on protecting older people by vaccinating younger people. And I find that interesting, given what we experienced with COVID, the idea that people should be doing something with the younger people in order to protect the older people and protect the NHS. It's this notion of protecting the NHS being something that's a collective duty, and therefore you must vaccinate your children. But I was a bit sort of surprised reading this, because it says, you know, only 1 in 4 school children vaccinated in England. How high would we expect that to be?
You're hearing so much of that, you know, at the school gates, where there are parents who are hesitant about the vaccine, and there are these mop-up clinics now that are happening where I live to make sure there is that extra chance for parents to take up the vaccine. But there are some that don't want to do it, Benedict.
There are some that don't want to do it, and I think actually it's interesting because as you framed it, we're talking about the government potentially picking a fight with doctors, which is sort of an unusual thing, or would have been once upon a time, because doctors are sort of very much a cherished part of, you know, the way that we call it our NHS. I think that actually, though, there is quite a bit of fatigue post-COVID, and that's not necessarily to blame doctors or blame the government. I just think that that sense of affiliation, that sense of sympathy with medical professionals has been slightly strained over the last couple of years, that relationship with them. And as I say, that's not because people think they're doing a bad job. I think it's just a broader perception of, look, the service isn't working exactly as it should do. And so I think actually it's a slightly safer thing to pick that fight now than it would have been a few years ago. But no, I mean, again, COVID, I think, has kind of had an impact on people's preparedness to do things like engage with vaccines, which of course can have very damaging knock-on effects of this. It's
really damaging. Really damaging if people don't get vaccinated when they should be. Right, I'll move us on then.
Yep.
Where are we going now? The
Telegraph,
I don't have it in front of me, but you guys do. So this is...
This is Rachel Reeves, and whether she's pushed the UK into recession. Benedict.
Yeah, I don't think... Yes, I'm going to just go off the bat by saying I don't think it's just her that's pushed the UK into recession. That will be quite a feat and quite impressive, and if anything, actually, she'd deserve a round of applause for doing something quite so catastrophic. But the UK economy is not growing. It shrunk by 0.1% in October. Before then, it had actually shrunk as well in the previous 3 months as well. But what the Telegraph is saying is that this is as a result, or partially as a result, of the briefing that was going up to the budget, which of course was delayed by a month, about all the negative things that might come down the road that perhaps then didn't come to pass. The idea being that this massively undermined confidence in the government and in the economy, and it stopped people from investing, and it's led to a large amount of capital flight. Now, yes, I do think there is some truth in that. I don't think it was handled very well at all. But I actually think also we need to sort of take a step back and look at the UK economy as part of a broader trend. If you take certain things out of the equation, things like migration figures, if you take the effect that that has on GDP out of the equation, the UK economy has not been doing very well for a long time. Yeah. I mean a really long time, since, in fact, the last financial crisis. It's difficult to say without that whether or not you could even say we have real fundamental growth in this economy. So, on the one hand, yeah, that wasn't great. Rachel Reeves' briefings and, well, we say Rachel Reeves, but the Treasury briefings and the backwards and forwards, that did not have a particularly good effect. Nonetheless, we are dealing with an economy that has been stagnant for far too long, and it must be said, where the criticism could be laid, this government doesn't seem to have much of a plan for breaking us out of that quagmire.
If you're going to go back to the financial crisis, then think about the things that have happened subsequent to that, and Brexit and then the pandemic as well, right?
And Ukraine, yeah.
Absolutely. Lots of impact upon it. Shona, why don't you move us on to what's in the Mirror then? We've been reporting the story as well. We've had the latest drop of pictures from inside the Epstein estate. And I mean, I guess it's so strange to look at some of these pictures, isn't it? And that's why we're kind of going through them.
And his circle was wide. I mean, we've all known that for such a long time.
Right, to see them.
But it's this last push, isn't it, before maybe the full files are dropped on the 19th?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the papers have run with this, not necessarily on their front pages and not necessarily pulling out any one image and saying, here's the smoking gun, here's the proof. We already knew that Donald Trump and Epstein were connected, had been in each other's company. We've seen plenty of pictures of Donald Trump surrounded by young women, which doesn't necessarily prove anything. But I think what's striking, you know, the way the Mirror has done this in other papers, they've got a collection of photos and there's faces blacked out, which always makes you think crime, always makes you think there's something being literally covered up here because we can't show these people's faces, which implies something to the viewer. There's pictures with Woody Allen there, and we all know about his complicated life and personal relationships. But I suppose one of the weirdest photos is of Steve Bannon, who we know because of his connections to Trump, sitting with Jeffrey Epstein and a very strange photograph on the desk.
It's only, we've only got 30 seconds left. That one's undated, which is interesting because that could have some repercussions for Trump, who said that he had sort of broken off relations with Epstein a long time before, and obviously Bannon was his advisor in the last term.
Yeah, and ultimately it comes back to the victims and what they went through, and that's what we should remember too. Shona, Benedict, thank you so much. Do join us after a short break. We'll have your latest headlines.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?